The clerk looked at her screen and frowned. It wasn't dramatic, just a small crease between her eyebrows, the kind people make when something doesn't load properly. She clicked once, then again, her fingers slowing as if she didn't quite trust what she was seeing. Finally, she leaned closer to the monitor and said very carefully, "I'm sorry, our system shows you as deceased." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my body rejected the sentence before my mind could catch up. I waited for her to correct herself, for a smile, for the tone shift that would tell me this was a misunderstanding. It never came. She didn't laugh back. She didn't apologize. She simply asked for another form of identification. That was when the laugh stopped. I handed over my passport, then my driver's license. She took them both, typed something in, and then stopped typing entirely. Her hands hovered above the keyboard for a moment before she stood up and walked toward the back office, still holding my documents. I remember standing there, suddenly aware of my breathing. Too fast, too loud. I slowed it deliberately, as if my lungs needed to prove something. I'm here, I'm breathing, I exist. No one else in the bank noticed anything unusual. People stood in line, a printer hummed. Someone argued quietly about overdraft fees. According to the system, I had ceased to exist, yet the world continued without interruption. That disconnect was more unsettling than panic would have been. When the clerk returned, her voice had changed, still polite but distant. Official. She told me there was a status issue on my account and that she couldn't proceed with the transaction. When I asked what that meant, she hesitated, then lowered her voice and said, "Your accounts are locked because they belong to a deceased client." Deceased. Hearing it again made it heavier. Final. I repeated the word under my breath, like saying it differently might change its meaning. She slid my documents back across the counter as if they no longer proved anything at all. I walked out of the bank feeling light, disoriented, like I'd stepped into a version of my life where gravity worked differently. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed with a notification, ordinary and familiar, which somehow made everything worse. According to the bank, I wasn't alive. According to my phone, I was expected to keep participating. 5 minutes later, my card was declined at the gas station. The cashier tried my card again, then once more, her expression shifted from neutral to mildly irritated. When it failed a third time, she asked if I had another way to pay. I shook my head, muttered an apology, and drove away in a tank that was almost empty. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt unreal. At home, I opened my banking app. Locked, no explanation, no warning, just a message telling me to contact customer support. I called immediately. The first call transferred me 3 times before disconnecting. The second placed me on hold long enough for the line to go silent. On the third, a representative finally confirmed it. "Yes," she said, reading from a screen somewhere far away. "Your profile is marked as deceased." I asked her how long it had been that way. She gave me a date, 2 days earlier, 2 days during which I had gone to work, paid for coffee, sent emails, and laughed at a joke. None of it mattered. None of it counted. I asked who reported my death. There was a pause, then she said, "It wasn't a government notification. It appears to have been filed in person." In person, that detail stayed with me. Death notifications don't file themselves. Someone had stood at a counter and said the words out loud. Someone had provided documents. Someone had expected the system to accept it. Someone had expected me not to interfere. She explained the process clinically. When a death is reported, accounts are frozen automatically. Activity is reviewed. Beneficiaries are prioritized. Access is removed to prevent fraud. The system assumes urgency, finality, and silence from the account holder. I asked if anything had happened during that review window. She didn't answer immediately. "Yes," she said finally. That was when fear arrived, not loud or sharp, but heavy. I learned quickly what it meant to be legally dead. Automatic payments failed. Subscriptions canceled themselves. My rent payment bounced. A client emailed asking why an invoice hadn't gone through. I tried to reassure people without explaining the truth because I didn't yet know how to say it out loud. I existed everywhere except the places that mattered. Every correction required verification. Every verification required access. Every access required proof I couldn't provide because the system said I wasn't alive. I felt trapped inside a loop where reality depended entirely on records I couldn't touch. And somewhere inside that loop, someone else was moving my money. The transaction logs were precise, cold, impersonal. They didn't speculate or apologize. They simply showed what happened while I was dead. Accounts accessed within minutes of the death flag. Beneficiary information changed under emergency protocols. Assets transferred using authority reserved for final situations. Nothing about it was random. Whoever did this knew exactly when to act. They knew which accounts mattered and which didn't. They knew the limits, the approvals, the shortcuts. They didn't hesitate because hesitation wastes time. I stared at the timestamps for a long time, watching numbers scroll past like a second life I hadn't been allowed to live. Each entry felt like a heartbeat stolen and repurposed. Only one person had access to that knowledge. Someone who knew my financial layout. Someone who'd asked questions that seemed harmless at the time. Someone I'd trusted with details I never thought would be used this way. When I confronted them, I didn't accuse them. I asked if they'd heard anything about a banking error involving my accounts. They laughed too quickly, waved it off, and said it was probably a system glitch. I stayed quiet, then they added, "I thought you'd be unreachable for longer." They froze immediately. The sentence hung in the air, complete and undeniable. I asked them to repeat it. They tried to rephrase, to soften, to explain what they meant. They couldn't undo it. Once spoken, it existed, just like me. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. I took everything to the bank: logs, screenshots, timelines, conversations. This time, no one transferred me. Meetings were scheduled. Internal audits began. Security teams reviewed footage. Forms were traced back to their source. Signatures were compared under magnification. The story stopped being about a system error. It became about intent. The tone of every conversation changed after that. The bank no longer spoke to me like a confused customer. They spoke to me like a risk. Meetings were scheduled instead of callbacks. Names were written down. Departments were looped in. Someone used the word liability and no one corrected them. Security footage was reviewed. Someone stood at a counter and handed over papers with my name on them. The camera caught their posture, their confidence, the way they didn't hesitate when asked questions. That mattered. People who make mistakes hesitate. People who plan don't. Forms were pulled from storage. Signatures examined under magnification. Handwriting compared against archived documents. A quiet room filled with professionals doing slow, careful work. No one raised their voice. No one apologized. Institutions don't apologize until the end. During that time, I lived carefully. Cash borrowed from friends. Groceries counted down to the dollar. Every receipt is saved. I kept screenshots of my own emails, my own work calendar, anything that could prove I'd been alive during the window when the system said I wasn't. I created a folder on my computer and named it Proof. At first, that name made me uncomfortable. Then it felt necessary. I noticed how often I checked my breathing, like I needed reassurance it was still happening. How often I looked at my hands, flexing my fingers just to feel something physical. The world felt thinner, like everything was one database error away from disappearing. I realized how fragile everything was, not emotionally, administratively. My life existed because systems agreed it did. My access to money, my ability to rent, my credibility, all of it depended on records that could be altered with the right paperwork. One false document had erased me. It took dozens of emails, hours of meetings, and a formal internal review to begin undoing it. And still, nothing moved quickly. The reversal took weeks. 7 separate approvals were required to undo the single checkbox that marked me dead. 7 signatures to restore access. 7 confirmations to correct a mistake that had taken minutes to process. Funds were eventually returned, transactions reversed, beneficiaries reset, accounts reopened. The system acknowledged me again quietly without ceremony. No one called to say sorry. Instead, policies changed. New verification layers were added. Secondary confirmations required. Death notifications now triggered additional reviews. Training modules were rewritten. Procedures tightened. I watched it all from a distance, aware that none of those changes existed because someone cared about me. They existed because the institution had nearly exposed itself. Charges were filed quietly, not publicly, not dramatically. Just enough to ensure it wouldn't happen the same way again. The person responsible avoided me entirely. No confrontation, no apology, silence. I understood then that closure wasn't coming. What stayed with me wasn't anger. It was awareness. I noticed how often people trust systems without question, how rarely anyone checks, how easily reality becomes whatever a screen says it is. I noticed how quickly access equals authority and how fast authority disappears once access is removed. I had spent weeks unable to prove I was alive to the people who controlled my money. That knowledge rewired something in me. I no longer assumed stability. I verified it. I still go to that bank. Same branch, same parking lot. Same counter. Sometimes I stand in line and watch people joke with tellers, complaining about fees, tapping their phones impatiently. I wonder how many of them assume the system is neutral, that it only reflects the truth, that it would never make a mistake this big. I don't assume that anymore because I learned something permanent. In modern life, existence isn't about breath or memory or intention. It's about records. About boxes checked and signatures accepted. About whether the system recognizes you as present. And if it doesn't, the world won't stop to ask questions. It will simply move on. So I monitor everything now. I review statements. I keep copies. I verify information that once felt safe to ignore. Not because I'm afraid, but because I understand how thin the line is. I learned that staying alive isn't enough. You have to make sure the system knows it. And that it continues to agree. The consequences didn't arrive loudly. There were no dramatic arrests, no public confrontations, no final speeches. That's not how this kind of wrongdoing ends. It ends in paperwork. In notifications sent quietly, in doors closing without explanation. I found out weeks later that the investigation had concluded. The forged documents were traced back. The branch visit confirmed. The identity of the person who filed the false death notification formally recorded. Their access points documented. Their intent established. That mattered, because filing a false death notice isn't a mistake, it's fraud. It's identity manipulation. It's an attempt to erase someone administratively to gain access to their assets. The bank classified it as a severe internal breach, and the matter was referred beyond the institution. The person responsible lost more than money. Accounts associated with them were frozen during the investigation. Their financial activity flagged. Their credibility questioned everywhere it mattered. Requests that once went through easily now triggered reviews, background checks, secondary verification, the kind of friction that follows you quietly, permanently. They didn't come after me again, not with words, not with messages. Not even with silence that tried to provoke a response. Because once someone is documented as capable of erasing another person's existence, institutions don't forget. What struck me most was how fast people distance themselves. Friends, colleagues, anyone who realized they'd been close to someone who tried to exploit a system that way. Trust evaporates when intent becomes visible. I never heard an apology. I didn't need one because consequences don't require remorse to be effective. The bank closed the loop, funds restored, identity corrected, records amended, and in the background something more permanent happened. The system remembered. And I remembered too. I remembered the moment at the counter, the way the clerk frowned, the way the word deceased landed in my body, the way the world kept moving while I stood there trying to prove I was still here. That memory keeps me alert now, not afraid. Alert, because the punishment wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration and accountability, about ensuring the person who tried to erase me could never do it again, at least not without consequences that followed them everywhere. And in the end, that was enough, because I didn't just get my money back, I got my existence back, on record where it belongs.